But we can start now, since we're live now, with your thoughts on the whole door referendum and people canceling Jimmy now, and people like Anna Kasparian having a meltdown, people like Tim Black having a meltdown. What do you guys make of this? Like, is
Yep.
it just
Yep.
people? It just seems so childish to me, the way that people can't put their beef aside and focus on what's more important, which is giving people health care. What are your thoughts?
You'll have to explain to me what the Jimmy Dore referendum is. I wasn't aware that people were canceling him.
So Jimmy Dore, he had an idea of how we can get Medicare for all passed, which he doesn't think it will happen, but it will expose some people. And that is that we have 15 people in Congress who are Democrats that ran on Medicare for all.
Yep.
And he's urging them to withhold their vote from voting for Nancy Pelosi unless she puts Medicare for all up for a vote in the House. And AOC was giving excuses for why she can't do it and that she's still going to vote for Nancy Pelosi no matter what. And people like Anna Kasparian, Tim Black, the usual suspects from like TYT, they were defending AOC. And they were bringing up past history about Jimmy, saying that he's a mean person, that he like attacked them because they were getting stuff wrong on Syria. So, what are your thoughts on that, Dak? Like, don't you think that we should be putting that aside if even people like Sam Cedar are saying that Jimmy's plan is a good idea? Like, why
Well,
bring up all this like personal beef from the past?
well, anybody who knows me knows that I'm not especially interested in people's charming personalities. I mean, if I were doing that, if I were concerned about that, then I wouldn't have a YouTube channel because I don't have the most cuddly personality. So Jimmy Dore, look, I think that this just raises a lot of questions about where the quote unquote popular support for an oligarchical gargoyle like Nancy Pelosi comes from. People don't like Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi has very limited broad support, even among Democrats nationally. She represents an incurably blue part of California, a part of the state that is not going to go Republican no matter what happens. And so because of that, she has a kind of congressional immunity. She can do whatever she wants, and she will never have to worry about losing in a re-election bid. So because of that, she has no incentive to help people out. Despite the fact that she's been in public office for the last 4 decades. And so Jimmy Dore's suggestion that Nancy Pelosi actually put her money where her mouth is and do something, even just make some symbolic gesture to show that she has any clue what would actually help people's lives, that is forcing people to separate the wheat from the chaff. And that makes them very uncomfortable because then their establishment role models aren't going to cut the mustard anymore.
What do you make of all this, Marcus? Have you been keeping up with any of this stuff on Twitter?
Oh yeah, I definitely have, and I agree with Dak's perspective. We shouldn't be here to worry about any of their personalities. That's completely irrelevant. We should be looking towards what the goals are, and what I feel is that what we're seeing on the left is we're seeing kind of the separating of the people who think like politicians and the people who think like activists. If you think like an activist, you want to get it done. You don't care about win, lose. You're not, well, you do care about winning, but you're not gonna not do something because you're worried you're gonna lose. You're not sitting up there counting votes. You're not doing any of that stuff. You're going full bore and you're putting the pressure on them to accomplish the goals you're trying to reach. I feel a lot of people, and Tim Black especially, I have such a gripe with the way Tim Black has been because Tim Black was so arrogant. I remember last time around, he was like, "What? You think that they should lose their job or possibly lose their life or whatever?" I'm like, I'm a combat veteran. You damn right. I think you should put yourself completely 100% behind it. And if you're not going to go at what you believe in 100%, then why are you there? And then Anna Kasparian, she was hanging out with Madeleine Albright, so she has no room to talk. I mean, TYT and their whole, if you look into, CAA, which they're on the same organization with Alyssa Milano and a lot of the people from MSNBC, and so they're all tied into this network and incentivized to play nice with the establishment. And a lot of our people, I feel, in the Twitter sphere and social media in general, don't understand. They understand policy, but they don't understand strategy in politics. Power yields nothing without demands.
Very well said. Yeah, for people who are tuning in now, I'm going to give a formal introduction now of who I'm talking to exactly. So Dak Rouleau here, who you can see. He's a fantastic journalist. He works at overwritten.org. He is the guy who had these viral videos interviewing all these politicians who ran on the Democratic primary about their stance on Assange. So Dak, you've done fantastic work. You want to give everybody like a little introduction about what you do, aside from what I just said?
Well, yeah, if you saw the video of Andrew Yang talking about Julian Assange, that was me standing next to him with the fedora. Somebody else had tried to get him on the record about Assange beforehand, but he ran away. And then for some reason, he decided to capitulate to me. So beyond that, I have my YouTube channel here at Dak Rouleau, where I've been trying to provide an in-depth look at each of Joe Biden's cabinet appointments. The mainstream media has obviously been reluctant to investigate these people's histories and backgrounds, so that's what I've been doing. I also do the Overwritten Report with Christy Doff, and I also do videos regularly with you, and I've also done videos with D. Pierce SSC, who has a good YouTube channel that you should subscribe to as well.
Yeah, and I'll be having D. Pierce SSC on soon for an interview about a really great book that he just read. So I also have Marcus Cage. He has a great channel as well. I have one of his videos on my favorites because it was just so informative about the way people in our society are entrapped in the matrix and how some people think that they made it out of it, but in reality they haven't completely gone out. So Marcus Cage, you want to give a little bit of an introduction of yourself and what you do?
Yes, I'm Marcus Cage, or on my channel, which Franco noted, the Political Matrix, I go by Young Morpheus. And I try to go in depth on that channel on touching a lot of third rails that we don't like to go into in politics. I like to follow money ties that are not often followed, and just make you think about other things. And it's not necessarily that you have to change your perspective on things, or that you have to, discard different ideas. I just want us all to really go back and re-examine, the history that we believe that we know, society. Is it exactly what we think it is? Is there something going on? Are there strings that have it set to a certain way? And I feel a lot of times we get so focused in on that tree that we never see the full forest. So on that channel, I try to do that. That's my new channel, which I do focus more energy on. And then I have my What I've Been Thinking channel, where I do more panels, and then I will be starting to do more political videos. But yeah, that's what I have going on right now.
Yeah, definitely Marcus, a great channel. Dak as well has a great channel. Subscribe to both of them, please. Support small independent channels. I found that the smaller channels tend to be the more genuine ones compared to the bigger ones with like over 100,000, except for a couple exceptions. And a lot of them do a lot of great work and point out stuff that some of the bigger channels may overlook. So Chuckles, you brought up a really interesting question that I think we can start out with, especially since we have Dak here. You said, is the reason why Scahill got that AOC interview because he could be trusted not to press her to explain her concern about why Assange might not deserve freedom when she gave that evasive answer? So let me just explain what happened for people who don't know. AOC got an interview with Jeremy Scahill, and that interview was recorded and posted on The Intercept just yesterday. And I'm just going to read what was said. I noted down word for word what was said, but definitely check out that interview. So Jeremy said, I want to ask you, and this could apply to either Trump or Biden, if you believe that these individuals should be pardoned: Julian Assange, Edward Snowden, Reality Winner, Daniel Hale, and others who have been charged under the Espionage Act because of leaking or publishing information that cut to the heart of some of the crimes of the American empire committed abroad. Should all of those people be pardoned by either Trump or Biden? And then AOC's response was, I do believe that Edward Snowden should be considered. I think there are considerations and concerns around Assange and should be considered, to be completely frank. But I think the use of the espionage, I believe the Obama administration was correct in declining to use the Espionage Act to pursue charges. And so I would agree with these assessments. And I think, well, I understand this kind of debate and in many areas on this, but I think that it was part of the authoritarian shift in the Trump administration to specifically levy the Espionage Act and against these individuals. And then Jeremy responded and then went on to further ask her, right, and I'm not trying to get you to endorse Julian Assange. I've also expressed some of my own opinions on this. But in terms of the narrow question on the weaponizing of the Espionage Act, which was not written to go after whistleblowers against all of these people, do you think it's appropriate to charge these individuals under the Espionage Act now? And then AOC says, I do not. So I just want to say, like, the best answer you can give is yes, like Assange should be freed. All these people should be pardoned. But I want to hear from first Dak Rouleau, and then we can hear from Marcus. What are your thoughts on this answer that AOC gave?
Well, I think it's a bit of word pudding. I mean, I don't know how I'm supposed to penetrate that. But then again, AOC has a bit of a penchant for this verbal vichyssoise that makes it incredibly difficult to understand what she means. When Assange was arrested almost 2 years ago, AOC was interviewed by a reporter from Fox News, and AOC said that she really didn't like what Trump was doing here. But now you can see that she has moderated herself, and she's trying to toe the party line, and she is pettifogging over the specific charge under the Espionage Act. This is the same route that Elizabeth Warren tried to play. She tried to say that Assange should be indicted, but not under the Espionage Act, as if it makes a whole hill of beans worth of difference for those of us who actually care about press freedom. So AOC is talking out of both sides of her mouth. This is the same kind of sucking up that The Intercept is notorious for. I mean, we all remember was it Ryan Grimm who talked to Bernie Sanders about press freedom, but somehow neglected to mention Julian Assange? We've gone on. What's that?
I said it sounds like Ryan Grimm.
Yeah, we've rode on this carousel before. And I thought it was interesting how you said AOC got an interview with The Intercept. It's supposed to be the other way around. But then again, journalists, as they like to call themselves, are so infatuated with politicians that they think it's somehow a rite of passage to go up and kiss up to these politicians. And that applies to me, too. A lot of people give me credibility just because I had a sit-down interview with Tulsi Gabbard, which is not the metric that we should be employing here. So yeah, AOC, you can see that she is becoming more and more embedded within the Democratic Party apparatus as she tries to stave off the internal pressure to get her out of Congress because she's an embarrassment to people like Nancy Pelosi. So she's failed on this issue once again, and AOC now is, I don't think I'll even be able to tolerate her now that she's sunk to this depth.
Yeah, and also I get the sense that she's trying to turn this into a partisan issue again. Like, oh, Trump was more authoritative on this, but then she's like, oh, but there's concerns here. Like, what do you mean there's concerns? Like, it's damn well wrong that they're torturing this guy just for publishing authentic information. So, Marcus, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I agree with both of the points that you and Dak brought up. One thing I guess that I wanted to add is that what a lot of people forget about the Espionage Act is how long ago it was written and what the original purpose was. Anytime you see somebody, and probably the past 100 years who's been put this charge put on them, it has normally been because some politician didn't like the information and couldn't find a way to have a real legal justification, and so they use this because it's kind of ambiguous and you can use it in many different ways. And so I feel that anytime you see this charge applied to anybody, you can almost certainly guarantee that that politician has something to hide.
Yeah, Dak, do you have any response to that, like to what Marcus said? You're more familiar with the Espionage Act than I am.
Yes, I was just trying to get my camera situated up here. Yeah, the Espionage Act achieved a bit of notoriety during World War I because it was being employed to punish people who were speaking out against the war, which is interesting because if you read any modern critical historical accounts, you're going to see a lot of skepticism about why the United States was involved in World War I in the first place. Concordantly, people could ask a lot of questions about why the United States is so fascinated with this Australian publisher who's been hiding out in the United Kingdom for the last several years. There's a question of priority. And there's also a question of the government's tolerance of critical dissent. And so in the case of Assange, the idea that the government would be spending billions upon billions of dollars. I mean, the conservative estimate for what the Trump administration, meaning the taxpayers of the United States, paid to get Assange kicked out of that embassy would be $4 billion. Daniel McAdams of the Ron Paul Liberty Report has said so the question is, why does the government think that this is a necessary and even virtuous expenditure? I mean, earlier we were talking about Nancy Pelosi and Medicare for All. Why isn't the government spending $10 billion trying to find a way to ensure that all Americans have health care? I mean, there's just a question of basic priorities and principles here. And the Espionage Act, with its antiquated status, it conjures up images of sepia-toned photographs or things like that. It really shows how grotesquely out of touch the American government is.
Yeah, for sure. And also, like, going back to AOC, what a shame, man. Like, getting our hopes up with finally getting people that are going to challenge the Democrats. And when it comes to such an important issue like Assange, she gives such a horrible answer. Like, again, it should be yes. Like, yes, like if you're a progressive, like, there's no in between. What debate is there? Like, what does she mean? The only people that are giving a debate about this are lackeys for the establishment, like elites. Like the mainstream media who works for these corporations. Like those are the only people that are trying to say like, oh, it's like people's lives were put in danger because of Assange. Why is that argument such bullshit, Dak?
Well, Ben Shapiro tried employing that argument after Assange was arrested. He said that Assange somehow allowed activists in Africa to die, as if it was Assange's personal volition that led these people to their death. But, you know, why do you think I went up to all of those Democratic Party presidential candidates and asked them where they thought where they stood on the Assange issue and videotaped them doing it. It's because I liked doing it. I liked exposing those people. And that was a lot more fun than this cheesy kissing up interview that was published in The Intercept. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to make as much money as that guy, whatever his name is, made for it. But I had a lot more fun going up and crashing the party for these Democrats and making Michael Bennet and all of the others look like idiots. But see, that kind of work is difficult because it puts you in an adversarial relationship to the politicians that you're interviewing, and people got to follow the Benjamins, as Ilhan Omar once said. So as far as being disappointed with AOC, I'm not disappointed in AOC at all because I never trusted her. I mean, before she was even officially elected to Congress, she was appearing on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. It was painfully obvious 2.5 years ago that she was part of the establishment. The establishment led Joe Crowley out as a sacrificial lamb to try to convince our generation that they had a seat at the table when they don't. So she's another performer, a thespian for the establishment, but I'm not disappointed in the least. It's what I expected.
Yeah, I guess you were more awake than me back then. I became more deeply aware about what's going on later on the more I read post 2018. Before that, I just was what based my ideology from what I remembered from 2016, from when Bernie Sanders awoke me from realizing that corporations are what really run everything.
Well, it's fine. It's fine. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard suckered me for a while, so I mean, people can make mistakes.
Yeah, we're all still in this process. Marcus, what do you think?
Bernie suckered me, so there, we all got suckered. And I've been following into politics and known about the corruption much longer than probably a lot of other content creators. Well, to I guess put myself on blast, I'm a little bit older than most of the content creators. So I've been like following Bernie since I want to say the mid 90s. When I start following Bernie. And so, yeah, that's what I'm saying. I've been, well, it started with Tom Hartman back in the day. I was following Bernie in the House. And then at the time when I was going to the military, of course, I'm paying more attention to what the government's doing. So that's what got me paying more attention. And as I would see certain bills that I'm like, that should pass. It started getting stranger and stranger to me why certain things wouldn't pass. And so I would kind of look at the progressives and see if they have enough energy to make any moves. And up until Bernie ran for Senate, it was pretty much dead as far as any kind of progressive wing in the Democratic Party, period. But what happened is because AOC was young and able to and garnered so much attention, it sparked such a revival into the leftist movement. The problem is most of the people who came into that movement, as far as like the supporters, many of them were not understanding how the chessboard is already laid out and what's going on and how much power you have or don't have. And the only power you have is you got to go in there and you got to force things. And if you go back into political history and you look during the Great Depression, the only way they got any of that stuff done is by forcing, demanding, and also using external pressure by not leaving the movement outside and only worrying about counting votes. By using your movement, you're able to change votes. So when you're doing all this calculating, we don't have enough votes, it's because you're not trying and your strategy is not very good. And the problem is many online on the left don't understand this whole dynamic of the politics on really getting things accomplished. And they're just looking at, okay, well, I got 60 plus this. And no, that's not the way you try to get anything done in Washington. Everything is force. And I guess that reminded me of something I wanted to say on Assange. Assange, the reason why they've spent $4 billion getting him out of that embassy is because it's what he's saying. If you start really looking into the stories which he's releasing, and I'm not even talking about just the ones in the United States, he's done a lot of stories which give a really, really bad look to a lot of governments and a lot of high-ranking donors. And I feel like what we need to be doing, many of us, need to be exposing his stories more and more and more and giving them, a microphone. That way, when they do this, what I call, basically a high-tech lynching, which they're doing to the poor man, that way, in history, they're not going to be able to try to whitewash this and try to cover us up. You're going to be able to see every single person, and you'll be able to catch them with the blood still on their hands. And if that's only if we bring out why they tried to silence this man.
Imagine how much more could have been exposed too this year in 2020 when things were so chaotic in the primaries and the elections. I mean, given everything that I've been learning this year, it's really hard for me to ever trust a politician. I don't think I'll ever trust a politician ever again. At least, like the system is just so set in stone that there's no way to reform either the Republican or the Democratic Party. So, like you were saying, Marcus, I think the best way is to rely on organizing, educating the masses, and forming movements. Like even if a politician is genuine about wanting to change things, I just think it's just really difficult to do given the system that we have that's so set in stone. Dak, what are your thoughts? Would you ever put your energy towards supporting a politician again? If not, what are you going to focus your energy on doing going forward?
Well, never say never. I mean, the only time I was ever excited to vote for a politician was Ron Paul back in 2012, and I didn't realize what he was up against. My experiences with the Ron Paul fiasco ended up preparing me for the letdown of Tulsi Gabbard. Regarding Bernie Sanders, not to sound like a hipster, but for some reason, I could never wrap my arms around the guy, even back in 2016 when I was an idiot. There was something about the guy that just subconsciously, I guess, it just made me a little uneasy. I mean, there were other politicians who could have suckered me, but for some reason, something about Bernie, I don't know. But anyway, I take a great interest in philosophy. You can see that the issues and the controversies that Plato was writing about over 2,000 years ago are still very much active and relevant today. And so I find that I get greater satisfaction from reading philosophy than I do from keeping up with Twitter trends. That's why I needed you to explain to me what's going on with Jimmy Dore and Anna Kasparian, even though I saw a little bit of that last week. I mean, to me, I feel that following these political campaigns and witnessing the breakdown of American society vis-a-vis those campaigns, that to me has been so much more educational and so much more cathartic than actually trying to pin my hopes on a politician. And so I see that a lot of progressive pundits are starting to succumb to depression, and they're not really trying to investigate the upcoming Biden administration as rigorously as they could. To me, I see that as my opportunity to try to do the unpleasant work that others are trying to shirk.
Yeah, and Marcus, I want to ask you the same question. Like, what are you going to do going forward? Are you going to still put your energy towards supporting a politician, or are you going to do something differently now?
I guess I have to answer that twofold. I guess I have advice for what I would advise other people to do. I don't advise anybody to do what I'm gonna do. I'm just like at the point where I'm just gonna commentate. I'm not putting any energy towards any of these politicians, unless it's something on a local level or some kind of initiative. Because I advocate for us to just literally just direct action. Write your own bill, literally. And yeah, it's not hard for us to start to gather some support. I mean, I've done that and given it to, to politicians on a lower level and let them try to see what they can make out of it. I feel like the only way we'll actually start to see tangible things is that we will have to, it has to come from direct action. It's going to have to come from a state or local level. I just feel like on the national level, unless we have another like 50 years to throw all these people out, I don't see it, and I don't see that happening in my lifetime. That we're going to have any paradigm shift from the establishment. And so I feel like following any politician, especially once it gets to the national level, I don't feel there's much fruit in that, because I know the kind of pressures and the torts and the behind the scenes, what's going on. I know how some of us will do all this energy to be like, you know what, don't select this person to the position, not realizing that first person was just like, the first person was a sacrificial lamb they threw out there. The second and third person were the real choices. And what happened is we spent so much energy getting rid of that first pick and thinking, yay, we won. And then they sucker us by putting the 2 and 3 pick in, which, it's kind of like a game of that shell game that you play on the street and there's no actual bean up under, In this paradigm, they own all the pieces. And if they don't own the pieces, then you're going to see that politician have some kind of a scandal, more than likely, or you're going to see them marginalized and put on a committee, which they're not going to be able to get very much done, or they're going to be a junior member on it. So I feel like direct action, that's the only way. Just national politics, in my opinion, is a waste of time.
I will say that commentating will eventually lead to more movements because you're educating the masses, and that's something really important to do. I know that Dak and Pierre is something that they strongly try to say as a message when they get together, is to tell others to start making their own channels, their YouTube channels, so that they can teach more and more people about what's really going on in our politics and around the world. I mean, the more we do that, maybe we can prevent stuff like from what's happening right now with the pandemic and how we're barely getting a stimulus. Like we should be outraged by that. We should be learning from what India is doing right now, in which they have a quarter billion people protesting right now. So I just want to let the audience know a little bit about what's going on with that, with the, I don't even know what to call this. Like it's barely even a stimulus. It's just crumbs. Yeah. So I'm just going to share my screen real quick for everybody. All right. So let me zoom in. So this was published on The Hill. All right, I'm missing something. So I'm missing one piece. I played the intro to HMO just now. All right. So just bear with me real quick. So Bernie Sanders, what he said in response to like how we're barely getting anything. He said, "I'm proud of the process that we've made," Sanders said. "I'm going to continue to fight for more because people are in trouble right now and they need help, but it's a good start." I mean, I wouldn't even call that a start. It's just so laughable. Like what we're doing. And then, so the White House last week had proposed a direct payment of $600 per adult and per children, which analysts estimate would cost about $170 billion. Meanwhile, look at what these other countries are doing. We have Australia that's giving people $996.65 of what would be equivalent to US dollars every 2 weeks. Britain is giving people $3,000 plus a couple dozen more every month. Canada is giving people a little over $1,400 each month. Denmark, over $3,000. France, 7,000 and a half. Germany, 7,000 in a third. Ireland, $448 per week. And then we're also giving these defense contractors so much money. So this is an article that was published back in September, and it talks about how defense contractors don't need another COVID bailout. This is published on The Nation by Mandy Smithberger. It says, despite their claims defense spending isn't driving major job growth, it just makes shareholders wealthier. As it turns out, creating jobs through Pentagon spending is among the least effective ways to rebuild the country, as experts at the University of Massachusetts and Brown University have both discovered. And I have a study here which shows that, which shows that Americans want to reinvest 10% of the military budget against coronavirus. And here's the figure for that. So it's not a popular position. It's not a popular position what we're doing. Like, why are we giving the military so much money? The answer is because the contractors are these elite that control our politicians. So we don't have a government that represents the people. So, Dak, what would you say about these crumbs that they're giving the people? You're muted. I can't hear you. You're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, good. Well, I know later in the show we're going to talk a little bit about Lloyd Austin.
Yep.
Lloyd Austin is currently sitting on the board of Raytheon, a company that is worth almost $100 billion. You can see that military contractors have it pretty good here in the 21st century. And I feel like anything I say about that is going to be a cliche, so I'm not going to dwell on that topic too much. But this story about the so-called stimulus check, I mean, $600 is about as flaccid as you can possibly get. And it comes almost a year after the not so impressive $1,200 stimulus check. I think what's relevant here is that this story is coming on the heels of the COVID vaccine story, and it's also coming just before the really cheesy story about Mackenzie Scott, who very, very sweetly donated $4 billion to various universities and charities after she paid probably nothing in taxes for her $23 billion gains during the pandemic. I think that these stories taken in aggregate are intended to make Americans think that their dilapidated, moribund country is on the brink of some kind of economic resurgence, some kind of economic renaissance, which is obviously not true. The United States is on the fast track to hell. But these stories are intended to increase consumer confidence, whatever that means, and to make people think that the government still has their best interests in mind. This is obviously a very sick and perverted joke, and that's why I decided to shoot a video on this, which will be available tonight at midnight Eastern Standard Time on my channel. But yes, as we turn the page from Trump to Biden, the establishment obviously has a vested interest in trying to convince Americans that the best days are still ahead of them, even though they most certainly are not. And so this story about the stimulus checks that will accomplish absolutely nothing. I mean, $600 doesn't even cover my mortgage, for Christ's sake. This pathetic gesture on the part of the government shows how absolutely sadistic our lawmakers are. I mean, they're not incompetent, and they're certainly not stupid. They are just sadistic. They really do get a pathological pleasure in making their constituents suffer.
I definitely get that sense from, like, let me bring up one example, like Mike Pompeo, when he, like, it feels like he gets off at the idea of going into all these wars and like investing so much in the military. He just like cracks up at it. And also that statement, that famous statement he gave where like we lied, we cheated, we stole, like laughing, like, and then for what? To destroy more lives in other countries while also destroying lives at home because you're not investing in domestic issues. So I want to bring Marcus into the conversation. What do you got to say about all this?
Yeah, I mean, you guys kind of hit the nail on the head. Dak bringing up, that Raytheon executive, and part of it is the same old, just simple corruption that these weapons companies are always going to want, more and more and more. I remember in the military, literally, I worked in the ammunition or ordnance field. We would literally intentionally go out and shoot up ammunition and blow up stuff just so that the amount that we got as far as funding, whatever, for our base, it would maintain or increase. And so I know that if I did that at a couple of different military installations and that was policy, then I know it's being done all the way across the board in the military, and that's making us have to, buy more weapons. Well, we don't actually have to buy more weapons. That gets into a deeper subject, but they're doing this on purpose. And I also believe that Biden, his picks, we definitely need to watch them, but I feel like even more so, we need to watch how Biden handles upcoming world events, because we all know this man's history. Pretty much every war that we've had, he has been on board for it. So, I just say watch out for what might come down the pike in the next few months.
It's going to be really hard going forward, especially with the ties that a lot of these people. Oh, hey, what's up? Great to have you.
Yeah, I made it home.
Yeah. As you guys can see, Marcus brought up earlier that he's 40. He does not look like he's 40. I mean, look at him. He looks like he's like my age. I'm in my mid-20s. Yeah, man.
I appreciate it, brother. I appreciate it.
Yeah, but as I was saying, like the people with ties to intelligence and big tech that are going to be in the Biden administration are very, very, very pro-censorship. And I even made a video dedicated to one of them, Avril Haines, who's going to be the director of national intelligence. She has a very sketchy past. And even just last year, I have a video on how she attended this event called Event 201, in which they were talking about how they were going to censor people in this like hypothetical virus. So it was like a simulation of a virus that like it was fictional. And then everything that's happening now, the way that they're censoring people, was what they were talking about back then, before anybody knew, before there were any reports about the coronavirus. So it's going to get really hard to report things. That we're going to have to overcome some obstacles, perhaps broadcast our news on other places, not on YouTube. They're already cracking down on channels that are exposing truths and going against the narrative of things like COVID. And they're going to start doing that for people who criticize the government for barely doing anything to help the people. So let's also talk about the failure of Bernie Sanders and the squad. Because, man, they were supposed to... Yeah, go ahead.
Can I add one thing on there real quick? If you look into that, actually, because they actually have the video where you can watch it through, and it's eerie, some of it, how word for word, some of it matches up with what you hear through a lot of our media. And so I just want to put that out there, that if anybody goes back, and you can look up this video and see it, and this was done, like you said, this has been done like a year or two ago. If you watch that video, it's
2019.
Yeah, it's creepy how they're like, okay, well, in this health provider, well, this health person, whatever, is going to say this, and then the media is going to say that.
Public-private partnership. They kept bringing that up, and that's something that they keep bringing up for Operation Warp Speed. I wish more people. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to say, we don't pay attention, nearly enough attention, to the psychopathy and the psychosis, the actual mental illness that's associated with the unfettered pursuit of power. It can drive people to do absolutely diabolical, insane things. And if you don't believe me, just go watch the Godfather trilogy. I mean, it's all right there. The idea that people can actually be driven to the darkest abyss of human nature just in the pursuit of power, and the potential for power now is far greater than it ever was at any point in human history. And that's what I think drives a lot of this. I think that these oligarchs are addicted to money and addicted to power, and they literally cannot stop. I don't know that the solution is political so much as medical. I do seriously wonder if some of these people like Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates and Mackenzie Scott and all of the rest, do they require some kind of medical intervention? I think that might be the only hope for humanity.
It's a sickness. Like, I feel like people can be addicted to drugs, people can be addicted to money, and people can be addicted to power. These people are addicted to power, and I think they do need like medical help. Man, I'm really glad I have you guys on. Like, I think I got like two of the most philosophical people on YouTube. Definitely subscribe to these guys. So let's talk about now the failure of Bernie Sanders and the squad. Like, they were supposed to have our backs here. And Danny Haifong had a great article on Black Agenda Report. So I'm going to read a little bit of that right now for everybody. Just a couple quotes, and then I want to hear some perspective from Dak and Marcus. All right. So, yeah, it's called When Austerity's Chickens Come Home to Roost in the U.S. Bernie and the squad were unprepared. So here's a quote from the article that I want everybody to read. None of these conditions are by accident. Neoliberal capitalist decay is a boon for the rich, even if it sends the system into an overall state of crisis. Jeff Bezos and the richest billionaires on the planet have increased their wealth immensely since the pandemic. U.S. billionaires have seen their net worth skyrocket by almost $1 trillion and counting. What has been missing from the equation is a U.S.-based movement, and that can fight back against the resultant immiseration of the masses. And we were just talking about that, how we need to start relying more on movements, less on politicians. And then another quote I want people to read is it says, Bernie Sanders and the squad have always been unprepared to challenge austerity because their struggle does not fundamentally confront the character of the U.S. state. The U.S. state is the enforcement mechanism of capitalism. Black America has historically been the most organized, vocal, and effective force in exposing the true character of the U.S. state so that the masses of people can get to the business of transforming it. The development of diverse faces in high places within the state has temporarily disarmed the Black consensus on peace and social justice. This has in turn created a huge weakness in the U.S. Left as a whole. There are but a few voices calling for Bernie Sanders, AOC, and the rest of the quote-unquote progressive Democrats to move beyond demands for a $1,200 one-time paycheck, and even fewer challenging their silence on the nomination of Black war hawk Lloyd Austin to Secretary of Defense, or the passage of the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA, worth $740 billion. You got money for that, but you don't got money to like help the people, which make the country what it is. Like, we're the ones that work. So who wants to start here? What do you guys think?
All right. Well, first of all, quoting from Black Agenda Report, I think if anybody really wants to understand the relationship between racial oppression and economic oppression. Probably the best place to start is The Souls of Black Folk, written by W.E.B. Du Bois, which was published about 40 years before Steinbeck wrote The Grapes of Wrath. But you'll find that the two cover most of the same ground, and they'll actually, what Steinbeck wrote, I think, is a little bit more frightening in that it paints a portrait for the economic future that could be awaiting all of us over the course of the next several decades. I think, just very briefly, what made affluent people in the United States feel a bit secure for a long time was if they were affluent white people, they could say, well, that suffering is just the fault of the illiterate N-words, and it's not going to be my problem. But now we can see over the next several decades, no, it is actually going to be white people's problem as well as everybody else's. So there's really no place to hide. And that it makes it even more apocalyptic. So going to Bernie Sanders, I've said for a long time now that Bernie Sanders would be the great protagonist of a Shakespearean tragedy, showing how he gave away every opportunity that he possibly could have in order to capitulate to the establishment. I mean, it is depressing and it's pathetic and it's sad. But that is the masochistic role that he plays. He tries to dangle the possibility of progressivism in the face of a desperate Generation Z or the millennials. And that's why the Democratic Party encouraged the man to run this time around. They didn't want him to run in 2016, but they saw that he was an invaluable asset in 2020. So as for the squad, I mean, I don't respect politicians, at least not politicians that are alive. I can respect politicians who are dead, but politicians who are alive, I just say to myself, you're making, what is it? What is the congressional salary now? Like $160,000 a year. Yeah, you're obviously licking somebody's boot in order to get into that position. I don't care what your principles are. And yes, I understand 8 years ago, I would have had a hard time accepting this about Ron Paul, but that was my 8 years younger self. Now, as an older, more cynical person, I have to recognize that he was probably licking somebody's boots too. Don't look to politicians, look to philosophers, and you can see how much better Ron Paul has become since he stopped serving in Congress and since he ran his own YouTube show. Now he can say whatever he wants, and for the record, he has repeatedly come out to say that Bernie Sanders is a joke. So that's my take. Don't support politicians, support writers, philosophers, artists, etc.
Go ahead, Marcus.
Well, I mean, you literally see it with John Boehner. I mean, we got basically a jackass Republican, let's just say it how it is. And then the moment he gets out of office, John Boehner is really not that bad now. And if it shows you somebody who can be that far to the right and be like one of our biggest rivals the whole time he's in office, and the moment he gets out, then you have some points of agreement with him. Then you have to realize it's the system that's doing this. And I guess with Bernie, I was blinded to Bernie to a degree because I had known his history so long, and I had those ties to his early time in Vermont and looking at all that. And I see Bernie as kind of like he was like a titanium nail that it was strong for a long time, but he's just been worn all the way down to a nub. And the squad, they look like titanium nails that are going to last for a long time, but they're already falling apart. That's kind of how I see them, because they went in not 100% behind what they were saying. Yes, they did agree with these principles and they supported them, but it's one thing agreeing with principles and supporting them and fighting for them. Fighting is a whole nother story, because anybody who's done any fighting, well, whether it's debate, verbal fighting or physical fighting, you have to commit to it. You can't halfway go in, and you can't be, well, I'm gonna kind of. No, yeah. You got to commit to it 100%. And I noticed AOC, like after after she had her little strike, you know, her little show outside of Pelosi's office after she first got elected, you started to notice a little slide, a little slide, a little slide, and with Bernie. The crazy thing for me is his slide started about 2016, or I'll say 2015 is when his slide started. But it was harder to notice for somebody who's so close and looking at him that way. But literally, I want to say Super Tuesday. I mean, it's almost like, bam, he just snapped in half and was done. I mean, he is like their complete weapon boy. I mean, whatever they want him to go out there and do, he's going to do it. And he's going to also go out there and give the cover that, well, somebody in the Democrats is fighting. Even though all three of us know one senator can literally stop everything going on, and he never stops it. He'll go out there and scream and rant and yell, and then we have AOC that'll go do the same thing in the House. Well, she won't even all the time hold to her votes. I mean, she lied about saying she didn't vote for that one thing. So, I mean, I feel like we cannot trust any of them because I feel like their position, their fame, their status is more important than actually accomplishing things. So if these are the people who are supposed to be our allies, and this is how they're behaving, what do you think the rest of the Congress is like? At that point, you should start thinking, man, if this is the best we get, half-ass, then you got to know that I feel like the game is up. And to go back to what Dak was saying, about what you read about the Black Minority Report, what they said is, I've said this for a long time. I said what's going to happen is eventually a lot of white people are going to come to grips with the fact of it's not just going to stay in these blacks and Latino and Asian. Poverty is going to spill out across the board eventually, just like the opioids, how that sprung out of control, how the drug war springs out of control. All of these, look at our streets, our bridges, whatever, across the board on every single metric. Nobody can show me a justification for trusting and still even giving them a iota of belief in anything that they say. I feel like you need to automatically assume whatever they're saying, they're lying, or they're half-assing, or it's not true. And you need to start with that metric first and make them prove what they're saying, because actions are not matching up with the rhetoric, which they often love to do on social media or in their campaign ads.
If I can just say, I just had a couple of thoughts I wanted to throw in here. One is regarding the multiracial suffering. New Hampshire, which is my home state, has a population that is literally 94% white. And we are considered one of the worst states in the country for the opioid epidemic. This is what Donald Trump was running on, was the idea of trying to bring back the jobs, and he was appealing mostly to white working class people. For Bernie Sanders, though, this is my psychoanalysis of what happened to the Bernie Sanders supporters in 2020, was it appeared, based on the polling, that Bernie Sanders had a legitimate chance to win the nomination. And because of that, many of his supporters said, okay, we don't want to hear criticisms about his policy positions. We don't want to hear criticisms about how he's capitulating to the Democrats. We want to go for it. We have a legitimate chance to get the man in office. Let's get him elected, and then let's worry about all of these imperfections later. And that was what happened when I got him on the record and he refused to talk about Julian Assange, was they said, I need to trust the plan, and I need to respect his game of multidimensional chess. And I think that is what happened, was it shows the corrupting impact of power, that when you perceive that power is within your grasp, you're going to throw your principles out the window, you're going to throw your philosophy out the window, and you're going to throw everything that got you up to this point out the window because you just want the power and damn the consequences. That is what I saw happen to Bernie Sanders and his supporters over the course of the last primary cycle.
These people are.
Could I respond? Could I respond to that real quick? Because being immersed in the whole Bernie world and the supporters, you honestly are giving more of them more credit than you should. A lot of them are not seeing some of these things. They're just like, Medicare for all, Green New Deal, and they can't see some of these other. They couldn't see it. Now, I've known Bernie's record. I know the issues and flaws. I knew about, some of his stuff, which he said as far as reparations, which has rubbed me the wrong way. I know his record inside and out. And I was open towards Bernie or Tulsi because I liked her. I like a lot of her positions as far as foreign policy. And I feel like she far outshines Bernie on foreign policy. So that's the reason why, it was just a matter of, okay, well, which one of these lanes is going to be most open? Because in actuality, even though I've always been a Bernie supporter, when it first started off, I wasn't even with Bernie. I was with Mike Gravel. Mike Gravel was, I've been a big fan of him for a good while. When I went back and, actually start learning about the Pentagon Papers and Daniel Ellsberg, that's when I, been a big fan of him. So when I heard, I don't care if he was 115, if he was running, he had my vote. And so, that's all I want to say. I feel most of those Bernie supporters just they're not as policy focused. Well, once you get outside of domestic, they're kind of, it goes right over their head.
Just one thing I wanted to say, I did 2 interviews with Mike Gravel on my YouTube channel. He's a very interesting man to talk to. He's very funny too. Off camera, he said some things that I can't say here, but he was a very funny guy to talk to.
I can see that based off of how he behaved.
Well, no, actually, I'll say one quote of Mike Gravel's. I said to Mike Gravel, I'm like, so I saw your interview with Afshin Rattanzi last year, and he goes, I don't remember that. And I was like, but it was on Going Underground. It was a great interview. And Mike Gravel goes, I'm 89 years old. I can't remember everything. And I said to him, well, I have a client, actually, who's 104 years old. He cuts me off. He goes, I don't want to live that long.
Mike Gravel, he seems like a really funny guy. I don't know if you saw, his trailer, putting all these, neoliberals saying, the most freaking, corporatist, capitalist talking points, and then he's, shaking his head. And him calling out Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama on that debate stage is a classic. Yeah. That's a classic. Yeah. Somebody also brought up
that was a few years ago.
That was 2008. I can't believe that was 12 years ago. Dang.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
And then somebody brought up Dennis Kucinich. Dennis Kucinich is also on the league of Mike Gravel. Great politicians. Yeah, but I feel like because things keep getting worse and worse with the system, that you're seeing these people who are very, how do I say this? They want to, before they get into Congress, the squad, they have these high goals, but they're still a little bit naive, and those people are so easy to manipulate, and so they get to come into this circle, and they really want to appease their social circle. People care a lot about their reputation, and to them, their reputation matters more to the people in their inner circle who they can actually see every day, more than they care about what the people think about. But they need to remember, they don't work for their inner circle. They work for us. They shouldn't be there to make friends. Like Kyle Kalinske said, the Justice Democrats aren't meant to make friends with these corporate Democrats, but we see that happening now. And one last question before we move on to the next topic. The article mentioned Lloyd Austin and how Bernie Sanders hasn't been saying anything about this war hawk. He hasn't been saying anything about any of Biden's picks. Even Neera Tanden, he was like, I don't want to say anything. So, Dag, you've done your research on Lloyd Austin. So you want to tell the public a little bit about what you found about him? I remember you saying in your video that it was difficult finding enough information about him, but what did you find?
Well, the reason that he was selected as Secretary of Defense is because Biden's first choice, Michelle Flournoy, had a bit of a record. If you want to find out where Michelle Flournoy stands on foreign policy, you just have to do a Google search. You'll see that she advocated for the annihilation of Libya and many other issues besides. So Lloyd Austin, obviously anybody over the age of 10 is going to be able to figure out where exactly he stands on these issues. But he has basically no public record of public comment. So what we had to do, there's something that a lot of progressives are getting all irate about, which is the fact that he sits on the board of directors of Raytheon. And yeah, we certainly should be upset about that. Unfortunately, that's just the tip of the iceberg. He's also currently sitting on the board of Tenet Healthcare, and he's also on the board of a steel manufacturing corporation. He also owns a consulting firm that has connections with Michelle Flournoy and Antony Blinken,
of course,
who is set to become Biden's Secretary of State. So as for Mr. Lloyd Austin, I'm just going to take a quick look at some of my notes for a video that I did about him. Lloyd Austin has been in the military since 1975. He graduated from West Point just a few months before President Ford hired, George H.W. Bush to the government. There were several other people, and I'm losing my notes here. Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld were also hired in the Ford administration at the same time that Lloyd Austin was graduating. So fast forward to 2003, Lloyd Austin served as a commanding general in various capacities during the invasion of Iraq. In 2011, President Obama nominated him as Vice Chief of Staff of the United States Army. In 2013, he became the leader of the United States Center of Command. He has a personal friendship with Joe Biden, and my personal interpretation is that if Hillary Clinton had been elected president, he probably would have served some kind of role in her cabinet, just like Neera Tanden was scheduled to. Unfortunately, for Mr. Austin, when Clinton lost, he had to wait a few years. See, Biden has constantly said, no, my cabinet is not going to be a remake of the Obama administration. That is a gigantic lie. You can see how these people, they operate like in a whirlpool, kind of serving in the Obama administration. Then they go sit on the board of Raytheon for a few years, and then they come back. So although we don't have comments from him explicitly stating, I support American imperialism, I don't know how much more help you need in order to connect the dots.
What do you have to say, Marcus?
Well, it brought up something he said. It's brought up something that Dak said earlier that I had a comment that I wanted to add to it, but now it reminded me. Many times we can see how the centrist Democrats and all of their allies and former staff and current staff and future staff, we all see all the ties. That's perfectly clear to anybody who actually takes the time to research it. Now, we all know who a lot of the major donors are, and we all know that they have a tie there also. We all know that all these billionaires are all making a ton more money. Now, I don't get why it's so hard for a lot of people on the left to connect that this is not by accident. Now, you might not want to call it Illuminati, you might not want to call it this, whatever, but there is an organization of people at the top who are making these things happen. They're all deciding, well, who do you think would be a good Surgeon General? Oh, well, we'll put this on. And then it goes to the Heritage Foundation and all this, and then it gets filtered in through conservative media. And then next thing you know, this random person who they decided on like 3 years ago, everybody's deciding on, well, maybe. And this is when George Carlin said it's a great big old club and you ain't in it. That's literal. It's not just like their interests aren't just randomly lining up over and over and over. I mean, this is a plan that's orchestrated. Kamala Harris was at the Bilderberg meetings like 2 years ago. What would she be doing there? Everybody who ends up at those meetings are only high-level reporters, royal families, and not even just politicians, world leaders. The moment you start seeing a junior senator starts going to those kind of things, it's only a matter of time before you know they're about to be running for president, vice president. They're about to take a giant step on the national level. And somebody is basically putting money behind them and getting press outlets to give them favorable coverage to push the horse that they want to win. And we all need to start paying more attention to some of this. I'm pretty sure Dak has probably seen a lot of these different ties I'm talking about with certain people. And I'm not saying every single person and everything is planned out to the letter. But if you don't think that there's some coordination going on between donors to corporation to politician, then I don't have anything I can say,
We should probably also at some point talk about how Lloyd Austin was heralded in the mainstream media because he fulfilled the demand for categorical representation. We had in CNN, The Guardian, BBC, I mean, pretty much any mainstream news outlet you want, they didn't focus on his political positions or his militaristic positions because those are a mystery. Instead, they focused on the fact that he was a progressive choice, quote unquote, because he's going to be the first black Secretary of Defense. Mm-hmm. What people forget is that Colin Powell was the first black Secretary of State, and we didn't see a whole lot of progressivism under his watch. People try to rewrite his legacy a little bit. That began with the Oliver Stone film in 2008, W. But you can see that there was the man had quite a bit of blood on his hands. And then, of course, Barack Obama. I mean, the Biden administration, each of his selections has been praised because it's the first black person to fill X position, the first woman to fill Y position. This has been the point to try to distract people from actually scrutinizing these candidates. And we haven't quite seen them go as far as to say that if you scrutinize them, then you are racist, sexist, etc. But obviously, this is being used to tell people, oh, this is so much better than Trump's appointees because he just picked a bunch of straight white Anglo-Saxon Protestants in order to fill these positions.
Yeah,
actually, I guess I push back slightly. I think that they are, to a degree, already starting to call some people racist and sexist for pushing back. I've seen some of it. Maybe it's not widespread yet, but I see the seeds of it already starting.
Where do you see it?
Well, I've seen it just through different people's threads on social media where a person is criticizing this person. Yeah. And normally what will happen is next thing you know, a content creator who I guess they're either support or adverse, they're going to do a video on it. And then and then you know how it always works. The buzz just starts building. And then all it takes is for one of those content creators that have a large enough platform. And then next thing you know, it's getting covered on the Hill. It's going to go through all the circuits.
So I was just going to say the selection of these people it just shows you how we don't have a real democracy. We have an oligarchy. It's by design that way, who they choose. Like Kamala Harris, they wanted her originally. That's why they put so many Clinton staffers there. And because if they could just be like, oh, you don't want her? Well, you're a sexist. You're a racist. Just like what you guys are saying about Lloyd Austin. If people say anything about him, they're like, oh, you're a racist. Now, when it comes to people like Bernie and the squad, we were saying something about how like having them there in our Congress, in our Senate, it gives people a false sense of people fighting for us. This is something I wanted to mention that I forgot to mention earlier. That I feel I can start to understand more what Jimmy Dore was saying in one of his rants when he was saying having Bernie Sanders and the squad is more dangerous than just having Joe Crowley or having any other corporate Democrat or having a Republican, because you know they're your enemies. With Bernie and the squad, they capitulate way too much with these people. And this causes so much damage as a result of people thinking that things are getting better when things are actually getting worse. Things got worse under Obama because people thought things were fine. And things actually got so bad. Like, look at all the wars we got into. Homelessness increased. We had the gig economy where people had no benefits at all with these jobs with Uber, with Postmates, with these dog walking apps. And that's what they're trying to do here. Trump was keeping people awake. He was an incompetent guy that the intelligence and the government didn't want anymore. And so they were trying really hard to get people like Kamala and Biden elected. And now they have, in Joe Biden's cabinet picks, this diverse cabinet that's supposed to put many people to sleep. But we're going to fight back because we're not as asleep anymore. The liberals might be. The liberals might be, but we're not. Go ahead, Dak.
Well, sorry, I just want to say, if you consider Lloyd Austin specifically, him taking over as Secretary of Defense, I argued in my video on Lloyd Austin that the Secretary, the Department of Defense may have been the first of the American federal agencies to turn against Trump, because you saw that there was this merry-go-round where first Jim Mattis was in charge, and then Mark Esper had to be in charge, and then Christopher Miller had to be in charge. I mean, it was constantly this game of musical chairs. Lloyd Austin is being praised for his ability to bring stability back to the position. You can see that what that really means is he has pledged his fidelity to the status quo.
Yes, somebody brought up a good point. Haplon. Yeah, Haplon. She said, they said that is correct. Kamala, #1 recipient of the Hampton COVID fundraiser money during the primaries. That's a really interesting point. Like, the way COVID feels so pre-planned is just so creepy. And her saying, I'm not going to trust the Trump vaccine. I'm only going to trust the vaccine that's made under us, like under the Biden-Harris administration.
Yeah, I wrote a full article about that interview that Kamala gave, wherein she talked about the not wanting to take the Trump vaccine. And I don't think I even talked about the Trump vaccine in that article because there were so many other disturbing things that were mentioned in her piece. Kamala Harris, it's interesting how she's been a manufactured candidate where even the Democratic primary voters rejected her not by 97%, if not more than that. And yet she's going to become the de facto nominee within a few years when Biden has to step down. I mean, this is a woman that nobody wanted her to be the president of the United States, but she's going to become the presumptive nominee just because Biden picked her at the behest of the Obama apparatus.
And she was like, look at how she was at one point before she dropped out. She was polling even less than Tulsi Gabbard. And look at the unfair coverage that Tulsi Gabbard had in comparison to Kamala Harris, where the media just was shoving her down our throats. And then people are bringing up in the chat right now about Tulsi Gabbard. It says Tulsi is a member of CFR. What is that?
Council of Foreign Relations.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, we were talking earlier about politicians. Like, are we gonna trust them again? Are we ever gonna trust any politician again? With Tulsi Gabbard, I feel like she just doesn't care anymore, and that's why she's putting out all these bills recently that make her look conservative. You guys want to share your thoughts a little bit about that real quick before we move on to the next topic?
I guess I'll let Dak answer.
Well, no, you go right ahead.
Well, I agree that she's getting to the point where, okay, she's almost out of the door, so she's going to pass whatever legislation she feels in her heart that she wants to pass. I know it's ruffled some feathers with some people, and we talked about it on my show, and because we had my two co-hosts. one is hardcore on one side and one's hardcore on the other side. And then I just had to say, you know what? I'm tired of playing middle ground. You know what? Let's just ask some real questions. A lot of people felt like, well, she's a woman, so she shouldn't, I guess, well, I don't know the terms. So anybody who gets mad at me for not knowing these terms, I apologize. But whatever, that she's cis woman, I think that's what it's called. They were like, oh, she shouldn't be saying this or doing that. And I'm like, okay, do you feel that a transgendered woman should do UFC and boxing also? Do you feel that would be okay? Because this did happen a couple of years ago, and a woman was almost killed. So I'm like, there has to be a certain amount of common sense that starts coming in with some of these things, and it can't just be about how we feel about everything. We have to actually think rationally with some of this stuff.
Yes, absolutely. And as for the trans issue, I am more than willing to give a full elucidation on the truth about that issue and how specifically it differs from the gay marriage debate. But this is not the time or the place to do it. What I would want is an opportunity to speak for more than 10 minutes to actually explain that there is a relevant difference, which is not to say that the transgendered community should not have civil rights, because only an idiot would argue that. But it is to say that there is a legitimate point to the legislation that was introduced. I think that this issue has been one where the Republicans have tried to play the Democrats in a way to try to depict them and force them to be more extreme on the issue than the middle ground actually calls for. But this isn't in any way my attempt to defend Tulsi Gabbard as a politician, because what I learned by following the Tulsi Gabbard campaign is that placing your faith in politicians, particularly major party politicians who have already secured that sweet $160,000 a year congressional salary, is just an exercise in political masochism. And so I don't have any reason to worship her. I don't despise her or curse the ground she walks on. She did really piss me off after she endorsed Joe Biden, because it was antithetical to her principles. And her fans know what I'm talking about. And her fans said some things that hurt my feelings a little bit. But that aside, my therapist bills aren't too extreme. The thing is that I think it's time to move on, because you can see that whether she's the Antichrist or whether she's the second coming of Christ, the Democratic Party is never going to allow her to have any kind of substantive role within their corrupt crime family. And therefore, the people who are talking about her running in 2024, with all due respect, I would advise them to take a little walk outside and see that their neighbors are getting ready to be thrown out of their houses because they can't pay their bills due to COVID-19. There are bigger issues here than defending Tulsi Gabbard's honor or any other politician's honor. That's just
attacking it.
Yeah. That's why, I was just gonna say, the more I defend her on this, it's just feeding into more of the argument when I'm tired of it, really. I understand why she put this bill, the bill we were just talking about that people are calling her transphobic for. I understand it. I'm just not gonna defend her. I don't want to participate in any argument about it. I said on Big Talk, Little Talk, my friend Israel's show, Israel the person, not the country, that I personally think it should be up to the sports committees to decide, not the government, but I understand where she's coming from, and I'm worrying about more important issues right now. And I will say, I wish Tulsi was leaving her office focusing more on those issues than focusing on these issues that we were just talking about. But the last thing, go ahead, Marcus, and then I'll bring up the next thing.
I wanted to respond to that. I guess I feel that, and I agree with you. I'm at the point where there's far too many issues that are far more important for us to focus on. So anytime attacking or defending somebody who, a politician anyway, is a waste of time, but especially a politician who's going out of office and they haven't like she's not even like given like some kind of springboard. Oh, I'm gonna do this or I'm gonna do that. So why even waste time with her? Let her go off into the sunset for the most part. And what you said about how they kind of push the position to make the left look a little bit more extreme, and I do agree with that to a degree. They know that there is a faction which is very extreme on any position you can think of in the leftist sphere, and what they'll do is they will kind of throw it into the leftist far left so that there can be division. And I feel like I feel like there's kind of been a division the whole time. We've just never really realized it. And the division, I feel, breaks down on socially leftist issues versus economic. And I feel like we have two camps now. Granted, most of the people kind of overlap, but I feel that there's a definite side which is prioritizing the economic as first and foremost, and it's like, okay, I'm not against these issues, but this is my focus. And then we have another aspect which I feel is more focused on trying to get more women elected. Who cares what their views are? Just try to get people of color. Who cares what their views are? It's just social. And it feels like that's their I guess measuring stick or their guide, and they use the economic leftists as cover.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, I agree with your stuff, but really my main issue is just to get women elected. And I think it's a lot more of that going on than I realized.
Yeah, for sure.
I forgot one other thing I was going to say. Dak had said that he thinks for Kamala to be leading candidate. I actually have a sneaking suspicion that Joe Biden is not going to stay in office very long. I mean, I give it a year, and I think maybe even less, maybe at about 9 months, 9 months to a year, I think Joe Biden is out of there. And the scary part, I really, now granted, disclaimer, this is a conspiracy theory. Has no kind of ties. I haven't researched anything. This is just a theory. I honestly believe that Kamala is going to select Hillary Clinton. I mean, as her vice president. And the reason why is because, think about it. They wanted Kamala to win. They couldn't get Kamala, so they forced it. And now at this point, you wouldn't be able to stop it if she selected her. We're just stuck with her at that point. And I honestly look at it. She's basically forming up the Obama-Clinton team for her to just walk right in, have Kamala as the figurehead while she basically chirps in her ears and tells her what to do the whole time, just like Dick Cheney did with George Bush.
I want to bring up like a funny meme I saw the other day. It was like 3 people at a church, one person sitting behind the other. And the first person was Joe Biden. And then behind them was Kamala Harris pointing a gun like behind his head. And then the third person behind Kamala Harris was Nancy Pelosi pointing a gun on the back of Kamala Harris's head. And then they show another scene of somebody all the way up, like what is that called? Like where people like play the piano, like like at a church. Yeah, they show a sniper. They show a sniper pointing at all of them, and it was like Hillary Clinton. I just thought it was so funny.
The thing about Kamala is, regardless of the timing, the conspiracy theory is that you heard the story about Joe Biden fracturing his foot while he was walking his dog. Then there was a story about Dianne Feinstein, which.
Oh gosh!
Christy Doff and I did an episode of that for the Overwritten Report. What was really concerning about that is that the New Yorker is not some renegade publisher. I mean, obviously the New Yorker had to receive permission from the Democratic Party brass in order to publish a story about such a respected, well-known oligarch. If it had been about AOC or another member of the squad, then it would have been fine. But for Dianne Feinstein, that was very suspicious. Was that a way to try to acclimate the public to the idea that Joe Biden has to step down for health reasons? And if he does have to do that, and if Kamala Harris is in fact the nominee in 2024 and Trump runs against her, then it's going to be time to make America great again. Again. Because I cannot allow Kamala Harris to take over the presidency, particularly if Hillary Clinton's going to be right behind her. But other than that, I don't want to go. Unless he pardons Assange and Snowden within the next few days.
Where'd you get that hat?
I went to a Trump rally. I'm sorry I keep prostituting my own website, but I wrote an essay about the Trump monster coming to New Hampshire, not this past summer, but the summer before. I went to one of his rallies, and if you ever need a reason to commit suicide, you should go check out one of his rallies. They're just so gut-wrenching. I left after I saw a group called for Pakistan get thrown out. Some guy tore apart their sign. It was just a little too. That after I saw a person get taken out on a stretcher when she suffered a seizure while Guns N' Roses was playing on full blast over the speakers. It was just a little thing for me. It was a hard day.
So I want to bring up one cabinet pick that is not really like a minority or anything. It's not really adding any diversity. And it's not Anthony Blinken. We've talked about Anthony Blinken on this show.
Not
Anthony, right? Anthony, not Anthony, like Anthony Reyes. Shout out to him in the chat. What's up, man? But Antony, yeah, we're not talking about him right now. We're talking about somebody else who has served in that position, and that's John Kerry, who's going to be the head of the Climate Change Board, right? So I found this article on Minpress News, and I'm going to pull that up for you guys right now to see. It says, John Kerry's think tank calls for war with Russia over climate change. And we were just talking about how we're not investing in helping the people during this crisis. Instead, we're investing all our money in the military. And one of the other crises that we're dealing with, aside from the pandemic, is the climate change crisis. And rather than investing money in mitigating that, we're investing money in the military to combat climate change. So here, I'm just going to read a little bit of what was written here, and then I'll hear from Dak and Marcus. Let me zoom in a little bit. All right. Recently appointed Special President Envoy for Climate, John Kerry has announced his intention of dealing with the pressing issue of global warming as a national security concern. America will soon have a government that treats the climate crisis as an urgent national security threat, as the national security threat that it is. The 76-year-old former Secretary of State wrote, I am proud to partner with the President-elect, our allies, and the young leaders of the climate movement to take on this crisis. So, hang on, let me pull my notes over here. Just bear with me real quick. So the article goes on to talk about how it seems like we're going to increase the military budget, even though the U.S. military is the #1 contributor of climate change. And the way that Kerry talks about the climate crisis being a national security threat, it's not the same thing. It's not the same thing that Bernie Sanders and Tulsi Gabbard were saying about it, about how we need to treat it like a national security threat. Instead, his is more of a aggressive, combative military strategy for how we need to deal with it. And I'm going to bring up like the 3 points that he brought up. But first, I want to call out 2 people that were brought up here that more people need to be that more people need to know about. That's Bill McKibben and Varshani Prakash. They're the founders of 350.org and the Sunrise Movement, respectively. And I reported on an article by Max Blumenthal on my channel, which reveals all the dark money corporate backing that these movements have, 350.org and the Sunrise Movement. Their connections with Elon Musk, Eric Schmidt, George Soros, etc. And they want to take counterintuitive measures of saving the planet by over exploiting natural resources in other countries and destroying the environment and they're doing that so that these multinationals can profit. These multinationals that are invested in their movements so that they can profit. So I would not be taking their advice on how John Kerry is going to be a good choice here. Not only that, but Bill McKibben has called on environmentalists to cooperate with the Pentagon before. There's an article on the New York Books that talks about that. And also, to everybody in the audience right now,
to cooperate with McDonald's, that doesn't make
it makes absolutely no sense, Dak. And I want to tell you and Marcus and everybody in the audience to go on their Twitter feed, look up any time that they've ever mentioned the military-industrial complex. They never mentioned the military-industrial complex, even though we have to cut back. We have to cut spending on the military if we want to combat climate change. That's not what John Kerry is doing here. No. So, fuck Bill McKibben and fuck Varshani Prakash and all the other higher-ups in these movements, these fake environmentalist movements. So here are the three things that John Kerry said we have to do. And he said this in a meeting with the American Security Project, the ASP, which he is a founding member of, which is a Washington think tank. He said the three things that we need to prioritize on is a huge rebuilding of the United States military bases, countering China in the Pacific, and preparing for a war with Russia in the newly melted Arctic. So upon reading that, I found a very difficult time understanding how that has anything to do with climate change, although the article does go on to explain the reasoning behind John Kerry saying that we need to prioritize on this. But initially, with these 3 points, what do you guys make of this? Like, what's the connection here?
Oh, man. The connection is, and don't take this offense. I'm not saying this to every white person, but this is stupid old rich white people. This is what that is. He goes to get a soldier because he hears everybody use the talk of we need to treat climate change like it's a battle, like it's an enemy. He hears that and takes it literal to go and get, a war veteran. Because John Kerry's mind only thinks in war strategies. Climate change doesn't know what the hell it is. He's just there because he came to Biden's aid and lended some credibility. That's the only reason why he is going into that position. But like I said before earlier, I said with this cabinet, you don't even have to look at names. Just across the board, we're going into some kind of new conflict, guaranteed. It's just a matter of if it's going to be a small one, a bunch of small ones, or if we're actually going to, God forbid, anytime soon we hit that World War III. And since I did bring up the God part, I will throw this one little thing in there. I won't go into depth because I know on the left, there's not a lot of religious people. So I'm not going to try to throw that in there. But one thing I will say is one prophecy it does talk about in the end wars is it talks about Mystery Babylon, which a lot of people in faith consider Mystery Babylon to be America, and it having a battle with Meshech, which Meshech translates to Moscow. So literally thousands of years ago, they were basically hinting at this nation off in the future is going to be fighting Russia and fighting China, all of this in the Middle East. So I don't know. I just find it oddly interesting and coincidental. But I look at, we have a bunch of idiots who walk around with a lot of arrogance and bravado. And where I grew up, arrogance and bravado without intelligence leads to problems every time.
It's almost too coincidental. What do you make of this, Dak?
Well, see, when you mentioned war with Russia in the newly melted
Arctic.
Alaska. Oh, Arctic?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, because I just read, I thought you said Alaska. I'm glad it's the Antarctica, because I just read H.P. Lovecraft's At the Mountains of Madness, and hopefully it'll look a little bit something like that. It was funny, Marcus had said he didn't want to sound racist or something. I think that both the film Get Out and the work of H.P. Lovecraft showed that good art can sometimes be racist. But as for if you want to get a really good introduction to everything that's wrong with John Kerry, I think the best source would actually be Bill O'Reilly, because back in 2004, Bill O'Reilly debated Bill Maher about John Kerry ahead of the general election, and Bill O'Reilly actually said John Kerry's position on war is the same as George W. Bush's. They have the same position on healthcare spending. They have the same position on education spending. They're the same guy. And Bill Maher could not respond to that criticism. So John Kerry has been the manifestation of the utter indifferentiation between the Democrats and the Republicans for at least the last 16 years. And let's his outstanding choice of judgment of character when he picked John Edwards to be his running mate once upon a time. John Kerry, I don't know why they keep resuscitating this man. He's a symbol of failure, and he has been ever since 2004. Earlier, I mentioned how Nancy Pelosi is not going to face any congressional consequences because her hometown is so incurably blue. John Kerry came from Massachusetts, the same exact problem there, even though he wasn't a senator. He's not a senator anymore. I mean, the thing is, and again, John Kerry also served in the Obama administration. I mean, the carousel that's happening here. Yes, Mr. Biden, this is the Obama administration part 3. And if you can't understand that, then you are lying to yourself. I mean, it's the Obama administration reloaded at best.
Is that a reference to the Matrix?
Well, actually, I wanted to say at the beginning of the show that I want Marcus to do a video explaining why The Matrix Reloaded is the best of the 3 films. Before the fourth,
and I agree, it is the best.
Before the 4th one comes out, because I know the 4th one's going to be terrible without Hugo Weaving and without Lawrence Fishburne.
What? He's not going to be in it?
No, Hugo Weaving?
He's been a little
neither Weaving nor Fishburne will be in the next one. But you know who is going to be in the 4th one? The Merovingian from Reloaded. He's coming back, dude.
he was delightfully tacky, though.
Hugo Weaving doesn't like blockbuster kind of movies, I think, because he also didn't want to come back as Red Skull.
His niece is really hot. I just have to say that. Hang on.
And I know he didn't want to come back. The Lord of the Rings, after he got all of that big fame during Lord of the Rings, it started to make him shy away from the spotlight more and more. And so every time he does a movie, he gets more and more spot. I don't know. It's like a weird kind of blessing curse thing he's dealing with. Like, he just wants to be an actor, and he does a great job that everybody loves the movie, and then he can't stand it that everybody loves it. We got the album. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, it's got Marilyn Manson and Rage Against the Machine, and I think it has. Does it have? It has Dave Matthews and Deftones. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was 2003 was a pretty good year.
So
back in my alternative rock days when I used to drum, I used to play a lot of like Rage and stuff like that.
Yeah. You come like a bomb, ignite. Yeah, that's good stuff.
So I wanna tell you guys like the reasoning for why John Kerry chose these 3 priorities. So Alan McLeod, the author of this article, he wrote the ASP, the American Security Project, notes that rising sea levels will neutralize or destroy dozens of American naval bases. Anthony mentioned we have like over 800 bases around the world, but the naval bases are going to be underwater around the world, including the world's largest such base in Norfolk, Virginia. The ASB recommends prioritizing the measures that can protect readiness of the military to strike at any time, also warning that rising sea levels will hurt the combat readiness of the Marine Expeditionary Forces, or the Expeditionary Force. Thus, a rebuilding of the U.S. worldwide network of military bases is in order. It goes on to say, the report notes that, the ASB also notes that the Arctic is the fastest warming area of the world and envisions a pitched battle with Russia to control the area, which is increasingly open to the maritime traffic thanks to the melting Arctic ice. NATO faces a severe military challenge in the European Arctic area of operation. It writes, advocating that the U.S. military should actively participate in Arctic joint exercises and publicize U.S. military deployments to the region, with particularly focus on the Russian border, perhaps by returning the U.S. Marine deployment to Norway. There is no time to waste. It concludes insisting that the region needs a concerted diplomatic, security, and economic push from the U.S. government. And then when it comes to China, I'm trying to see like what they said about that. Oh, they also said they're going to ramp up military forces on the border because people are going to be fleeing from Central and South America and going up north. And so they're going to ramp up the military bases on the border. I'm trying to find what they said about China here. So, okay, I can't find it, but I'll let you guys know what they said because I remember they were saying that China is going to be helping out a lot of people, a lot of countries that are like islands, by like helping them rebuild their energy sector. There's going to be more negotiations in those regions, and it was saying that the U.S. just can't allow that the U.S. has to be there and take control of these countries. Look at what they're prioritizing. Rather than prioritizing on black and brown people who are going to be hurt the most by climate change, they're prioritizing on more colonialism, more imperialism. Like they're taking the opportunity to implement more imperialism under a climate crisis. Guys, what do you have to say about this?
This is just a Monroe Doctrine. Wow.
This is what Lil Wayne called "fuck bitches, get money."
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm surprised more people aren't talking about this. A huge shout out to Alan McLeod for writing about this because climate change is going to exacerbate. It's going to get worse within the next 10 years. And this is what the U.S. is going to do. And it's going to use climate change as an excuse. And John Kerry is the architect behind this.
Yep. Man, oh man, oh man. I literally did a video when Joe Biden's dumbass came out and was saying that Trump was the first racist president. I did a video breaking down how every single president, almost every president we had has been racist. Almost every one of them. I mean, but maybe I can count them on my hand who weren't. And this is, goodness gracious. You know, Joe Biden is always, what I was going to say is in that video, bringing up how they're racist, that racism led to them feeling like we can't let this country do this, or we can't let this country get this power. And it's like, who the fuck are you to tell other countries what to do? America, stop. That's the reason why I believe that we're eventually going to get attacked by one of these nations that's going to lead to World War III because we won't stay out of people's business. I mean, if Russia wants to go into Antarctic and they're already trying to search for oil, because that's really what it's boiling down to. They're worried about them getting some oil and jumping ahead of them as a superpower. And so, we can't let Russia get any, so let's slap them down. And man, I swear it's going to lead to this country's downfall.
And if China's negotiating with these countries, like these countries have more than every right to negotiate with China. Like Anthony Reyes said on the other day when he was on this show, he said, China comes in with the briefcase. The U.S. comes in with the bulldozer.
Well, this is something that Noam Chomsky has been talking about for a while, where if these nations don't want to invest in China, then and they don't have in China because nobody has a gun to their heads. It's just that the American model is so grotesquely out of date. But this idea that these poor, impoverished, not necessarily white people of other nations need the benevolence of the United States to intervene on their behalf. I mean, that is something that that's kind of been the foreign policy motto, at least of the 21st century, was there were all sorts of horrific stereotypes about the people in Iraq, how they needed the liberation of a civilization more morally advanced. And that stereotype prevailed, obviously, in Libya. There's the stereotype that they're just a bunch of illiterate savages living in mud huts who needed the Europeans to come and save them from damnation. And so it's not at all surprising to see that rhetoric continue under the Biden administration. It's interesting, the selective progressivism of the racial critics who fueled the Biden campaign in at least in the mainstream media. And just a quick point that Marcus pointed out, he said that pretty much every American president has been racist. My home state of New Hampshire, our only president, Franklin Pierce, probably set the benchmark for racism.
Yeah, he was pretty fucking bad.
He was, and he was also a, I mean, we also have a statue of him in front of the Capitol. There's
you even look at just anybody, Frank. If you could, Franco, if you could pull up an image of what Franklin Pierce looks like, he looks like a douchebag. Just looking at him, he just looks like a hateful, angry bully.
No, actually, Franklin Pierce was considered the most gorgeous president who ever lived. Actually,
he looks like a ass.
Oh my God! What a punchable face.
No. Do you know? Hold on. I just say this one thing though. If you say he looks like an asshole, that's perfectly fine. Do you know about his family tragedies?
What?
When he was on his way to the inauguration in D.C., the train he was on derailed and killed his 4-year-old son.
That's right.
That was after his 10-year-old son died of tuberculosis. So that man was definitely a racist prick. But I do want to say he had a very tragic family life, and that's why he was drinking alcohol compulsively, like 24 hours a day. That's why his face looked so haggard and dried out.
Well, you see some of the other pictures of him because that's one where he's kind of like ready for the picture. You catch some of those other ones, he looks beat down in the picture. He looks like he's been doing a lot of drinking.
I don't know how well this one will show up, but we can try.
Yeah, we can. It shows up well. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I'm being a native New Hampshireite. I've naturally taken quite a bit of interest in Mr. Pierce. So I just want a little historical fact. Outside the New Hampshire State Capitol, right down the street from my house, we have a statue for Mr. Pierce. There's also a statue for a man named John Hale, who was a politician of some sort. His daughter was once engaged to none other than John Wilkes Booth.
Yeah, just real quick. Just real quick. Anthony really wants me to tell you, Marcus, that he saw you on Niall Alcom's show, giving Niall the business. And then Thomas, Oklahoma. I want to say, speaking of racism, speaking of climate change, indigenous people are going to be the most affected by this. Thomas, Oklahoma. Great point in the chat. And so, ramping up militarism, ramping up imperialism, this is more colonialism. More colonial. It just doesn't go away.
If I can add, I mean, a lot of this, if you look at it, it's the same exact mentality going all the way back to like the 1400s, 14 and 1500s. It's the same mentality. Those European nations decided, I need to go into these other countries and I need to teach them how to live and I need to go monitor them. And really what it was one part of it was, I want free slaves. Another part was, I want the resources in those nations. And I have a little bit of homework that everybody out there should do. There are 4 countries that do not have Federal Reserve banks. I want you to look up and tell me, are those countries liked or are they hated? And is our government attacking them or are we being nice to them? There's 4 nations that don't have Federal Reserve banks. And you'll notice an interesting trend that's happened with those nations for about a good, about a good 40 years.
Nice.
I have homework for everyone. Go to ruthlessreviews.com and read the article Saddam for President that was published in 2006, where the author makes a very serious argument that Saddam Hussein should be put back into power because he's far more competent than any Western politician. And he actually justifies him killing the Kurds, by the way, which is a very interesting argument.
Well, I make that argument too. I mean, to be honest, I make that same argument because a lot of people don't when you don't understand religions and people's cultures. I spent a little bit of time kind of in that theater, that part of the world. So I understand the differences between, Shiite, Sunni, Baptists, and various other different sects. And if you don't understand this and you just start yanking leaders out of power, you don't know what the hell you're doing. When people jump on Saddam and say, oh, well, he gassed the Kurds. Do you know what the Kurds were trying to do? They were trying to overthrow him. Now, in the United States, if any organization got together and tried to assassinate a president, what would happen? If they didn't kill him, you guarantee none of them will ever see sunlight again. So I don't get why it's this double standard for a president just, acting the way any leader would do. No leader would just be like, oh, well, you guys tried to kill me, but I'm gonna let that slide.
Especially in America. Especially in America, the land of the Second Amendment, where you're supposed to be able to defend yourself. Of course, he was justified in defending his post.
It's the same with Castro. You know how many times that the CIA admitted that they tried to kill him?
What's interesting is I cite this film all the time. People really need to watch The Godfather 2, which shows a very interesting portrait of the Cuban Revolution. It does not mention Castro by name, but it shows it just in plain detail that when these Western businessmen were sodomizing the country's economy the way that they were, a revolution was inevitable. The film doesn't say that every single thing the Castro government did was moral or virtuous, but it says that if it's fuck around and find out, that it just depicts it as if it were a matter of fact. But there's been some propaganda in this country over the last 50 plus years that we're told to forget this history.
Yeah, and these revolutions, they happen as a result of self-defense. So the U.S. wants to be a bully. They want to keep attacking. People are going to defend themselves.
I don't know. I don't know. It has to be that highfalutin. It doesn't even need to be self-defense. It's just that when you're putting people to the point of desperation, they're going to react in a brutal way. It's a matter of physics.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it makes perfect sense. And that's something that's never. And we're told. Every leader is this, he's that, he's this, he's that, she's this, she's that. And we need to I feel like we need to actually do more research into some of these issues. A lot of people don't know much about, through family and stuff, I have a close tie to this stuff. So a lot of people do not know anything about Batista, who was there before Castro.
Yeah.
If you learn about Batista was brutal. And to most of the Afro-Latinos, he was very, very vicious, extremely racist, and was slaughtering them. And in a little bit of time Batista was in power, his death rate is about the same as Castro's over a 40-year period.
Yeah.
But Batista's depicted in that film, actually.
Yeah, when
and just one last. Oh, go ahead, Franco.
No. Finish up. I was just gonna close off and just make one last comment.
Just wanted to say, you know who tried to annex Cuba for the United States officially? That would be Franco. Yeah.
Just keeps coming back.
Monroe Doctrine. Money
So-
laundering
yeah.
all day long.
Franklin Pierce was very involved in. There was quite a bit of international controversy brewing at the time that Franklin Pierce was president. He was also involved in the Kansas-Nebraska. I can't name that specific legislation, but no, he did try to formally annex Cuba to make it a United States territory. And what's interesting is you can only imagine how different would history have been if he had succeeded in that. Would we today try to say that he was a good president and try to whitewash his racism if he... Yeah. Who's to say if just that one little thing had gone differently?
Think about how Lincoln is referred to, and Lincoln is. I mean, a lot of people don't know if Lincoln could have, if he could have ended the war without ending slavery, he was going to do it.
Yes.
So I mean, it was just kind of like, oh well, I guess this is how it's going to work. So, and we give him so much credit that he's such this great man, and he was just trying to stop slavery. And no. Y'all need to get back into some history books.
Frank, what I think with Abraham Lincoln is, and then I'll let you go, Franco, is that the issue is that Lincoln saw correctly that slavery was on its way out, because slavery is, besides its moral problems, it's a legally indefensible concept where you say that this person is a human being, but in other states he's property, and then when he crosses over the political boundary he ceases to be property. It's just, putting the moral issues aside, it's just really incoherent. And so Lincoln saw that in other parts of the world it was being abolished, he decided to pursue the same practice.
Technology helped.
Yes, it did. Absolutely. Because up here in New Hampshire, we had hardly any slaves relative to the South, just because it wasn't, not because we wouldn't have used them, but just because it wasn't economically necessary.
Yep. Well, certain things didn't grow in the North, which grew in the South either, so that made a difference.
Absolutely.
I was just going to say one thing about Bautista. You guys brought him up and how not enough people know about him. Where you will find a lot of Cubans in Florida and Miami. When I had Nico House and Glory Jones on here the other day, I think it was like last week, they were discussing also how so many of the Cubans there don't even know about Bautista. They don't even know who he is. Like not even like they don't know his history. They don't even know who he is. That's how like whitewashed we are here in the States. They don't and they also, their parents,
haven't they heard
they don't tell
golden
them.
telephone?
The telephone?
Well, I'll tell you something. A lot of people don't know about the Cubano community down there. Majority, their family members come from Batista supporters.
Yeah.
They were a lot of the wealthier businessmen who were afraid that their companies were going to get nationalized. So they all rushed to Miami because they didn't want to have to deal with socialism. It's the same right wing, and I hate to say it this way, but majority of them were not Afro-Cubanos.
Yeah, a lot of them were also saying, they were saying that some of them were also be like, oh my, that some of the Cubans there were saying, oh I come from, like my aunts, my family, like my grandfather, they were very close to the opposition against Castro, and so it's like, okay, so they were close to Bautista then. So that's why a lot of the Cubans there are so conservative and so against socialism. I just want to let everybody know here, I'm really grateful for the love you guys are showing me. We peaked at 60 viewers. I remember like 2 weeks ago, I would peak at like 20 something. Thank you guys so much. You don't know how much it means to me. To see the appreciation from people. I would like to see other smaller channels grow as well. Definitely subscribe to Marcus Cage and Dak Rouleau. You guys can go ahead and put your links to your channels like in the chat for people to subscribe. I would say you guys are like the most philosophical people on political YouTube, in addition to D. Pierce SSC, who I'm going to interview soon. definitely subscribe to them. Help out small independent political channels, so we can be as objective as we can, giving you guys the news. Thank you guys so much for watching. Dak and Marcus, you want to give any closing remarks?
I'll just say check out my YouTube channel because I'm trying to get off Twitter as quickly as possible. I absolutely hate that app, and I don't want to use it for too much longer. So yeah, just check out my YouTube channel. That's where I'll be most active in the hereafter.
I share his same feelings with Twitter. Definitely, I'm definitely hating it more and more every day. Of course, but as I'm still on there, kind of just there's nothing better at the time, and what we're stuck with, you can find me on Twitter. Just look up Marcus Cage or Real Marcus J Cage. Either one of those, you should pop me up. And you find one page, you'll find all my pages. I got a couple. And if you have the chance, make sure to try to catch up with us on our live streams. We normally film Saturday. What would it be? 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern. So if you're a night owl and you'd like to get in for any topic is open on my show. So I don't reject anything. I don't care about being demonetized. I don't care about being banned. So any topic you feel like coming up. And also occasionally I will do short video. I'll do requests. So if somebody has a topic, they're like, hey, Marcus, why don't you cover this? Or what do you think? I will do a video, or I will sit down with any channel to have a conversation, dialogue, talk about it. So, I'm very accessible. So just hit me up. I appreciate so much for Bruno having me on here. And it was definitely a lot of fun on here with Dak. I do remember the fedora. I remember that. I did not realize that was the same guy. Let's see him. But I'm like, okay, now I could put two and two together. But yeah, I appreciate being here. There he is.
That's the first time I ever saw you was with that.
Well, yeah, I remember my former newspaper editor. He was so angry when he saw me interviewing Tulsi with a fedora. He didn't think it was funny. He was like, it made you look like an idiot. And I was like, well, you know what, Warren? I had an interview with Tulsi and you didn't, so yeah, the fedora is not for everybody, which is why I don't wear it too often anymore. But yeah, I had a really good time talking to Marcus.
If you come on my channel, I'm gonna beg you to wear the fedora the whole time. I love it.
Only if I'm under the influence of LSD, which if it's midnight on the East Coast,
that'll be a great show.
So yeah, I had a really good time talking to Marcus tonight. I liked talking to Franco. I thought this was a really good discussion. Hopefully we can do it again soon.
All right, there you guys go. Like this video, share this video, subscribe to all of us.
Thumbs up.
And stay informed. I love you guys.